60,000 years ago, your entire family was trapped. Not in a cage, in a continent. Every human alive lived in Africa, and the only way out was across something none of them had ever crossed before, the ocean. No boat, no map, just open water stretching to the horizon. If a small group of people hadn't figured out how to cross it, you wouldn't exist. Africa is almost an island, surrounded by water on nearly every side. To the east, a narrow stretch separated Africa from Arabia. It was called Bab-el-Mandeb, Gate of Tears, named for how dangerous it was to cross. For hundreds of thousands of years, that gate stayed shut. Humans survived ice ages, droughts, even volcanic eruptions, but they couldn't get past the water. So how did the gate open? But before the gate opened, something else had to happen first, something that had nothing to do with boats.
The planet was getting colder. Ice sheets were spreading across the north, pulling water out of the oceans to form them. Around 50,000 to 60,000 years ago, sea levels dropped roughly 70 meters lower than today, and the channel at the Gate of Tears became far narrower, with small islands possibly scattered in between like stepping stones. The wall was shrinking, but it hadn't disappeared, and they had no ships.
These were people who'd spent their whole lives on land. The open sea was something else entirely. Currents, waves, nothing predictable underneath them. Going in blind meant dying fast. So they didn't go in blind. Archaeologist Dr. Sarah Words, who has studied this period extensively, points to evidence that survival here wasn't about courage. It was about generations of patience. This took generations. Archaeologists found shell middens, ancient piles of empty shells, dating back 125,000 years in Eritrea, proving early humans were eating seafood collected by walking the beach. Families returned to the coast season after season, learning the tides, learning which days the water stayed calm. And they noticed something. Logs floated. Branches drifted across the water and sometimes drifted back. Someone, eventually, looked at a floating log, looked at the distant shore, and had a thought that changed everything. But here's what most people get wrong about this moment. They imagined some kind of invention. There wasn't one. Stone tools, fire, but a real boat built to handle waves, that was thousands of years away. Logs tied together with vines. Nothing fancy, just something that floated. And here's what made it possible. Because sea levels were so much lower, the opposite shore would have actually been visible from the African coast on a clear day. They weren't paddling into the unknown. They were paddling towards something they could see. A small group pushed off, holding onto logs tied with vines. And they made it. Scientists estimate the total population in Africa at the time was only 2,000 to 5,000 people. Of those, possibly as few as 150 to 1,000 individuals made the crossing. From that one small group, every person alive today outside of Africa is descended. Every person in Europe, Asia, the Americas, all of them trace back to that crossing. But what happened next makes the first crossing look easy. Generations later, their descendants hit something far harder, the journey to what is now Australia. No visible chain of islands this time. At least 80 kilometers of open ocean, with currents strong enough to pull a swimmer straight out to sea. This wasn't a narrow gate with land in sight. This was nothing but water in every direction. Geneticist Dr. S.K. Willerslev, who has analyzed ancient Aboriginal Australian DNA, found something that should be impossible. Evidence that this crossing was deliberate, not accidental. Researchers tested the math. Models simulating pure chance rafts drifting randomly with the current, gave less than a 5% probability of success. That number only changes if people were actively choosing when to leave and steering toward a destination. This makes them the first known open ocean voyagers in human history, crossing real distance, no compass, no visible shore, no way to turn back if they were wrong. And they made it.
A wall of water blocked your ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years. The ocean shrank just enough. A small group who'd spent generations reading the coastline built rafts out of logs and vines and paddled toward land they could see. A few hundred people. That's all it took.
And their children kept going, further along coastlines, further past gap after gap, until their descendants crossed open ocean with no land in sight at all, using nothing but instinct and the stars. They weren't trying to make history. They were probably just following food. Would you have gotten on that raft? Be honest with yourself for a second, because the people who said yes are the reason you're watching this right now.